Hello and welcome to RAN in Focus, a podcast brought to you by the Radicalization Awareness Network, RAN Practitioners. My name is Jordi Nijnijs and today we will be talking about anti-establishment extremism. Fueled by the COVID-19 pandemic and the measures taken by governments to deal with it, there has been a surge in anti-establishment extremism throughout Europe. Violent extremist groups have been feeding on and propagating conspiracy narratives and disinformation, which are reaching a broad audience of people. Our first guest, Nicola Hieke from Bavaria Against Right-Wing Extremism in Germany, has had a clear eye on the infiltration and abuse of the anti-vaccination movement by violent right-wing extremists. Hi Nicola, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me here today. Let's just dive into this topic. In my country, the Netherlands, there was a lot of highly publicized unrest during various lockdowns. Some of them turned pretty violent, and they seem to be aimed at the authorities. Can you tell us a bit about the situation in Bavaria and maybe Munich specifically?
Generally, we had a very similar situation all over the state of Bavaria. There's a lot of bigger protests in Munich and all of Germany, actually. There were some attempts even in August 2020 during a really big march in Berlin to actually storm the parliament in Berlin. Munich has a very vibrant scene that is still active. We had marches and it was a mix between the far right and pretty much everything else.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing about these movements, right? It's anti-vaxxers. Sometimes we can, perceive them as harmless or a bit kooky. But apparently the far right scene is pretty much infiltrated these movements. How and why do you think this happened?
Here we are talking about a protest which is driven by conspiracy theories and conspiracy narratives, which are basically the foundation of far-right ideology anyways. I think the far-right realize they have a chance to actually find new actors where they can form long-term alliances and quite often something completely new formed, like we have new associations, movement, even a new party forming out of it. We have a situation where known neo-Nazis would actually be the head of the movement in a small city and give speeches there, and about 1,500 people join them, and then afterwards they film everything and they spread it on social media, and it makes it look as if they are wildly popular, but probably half of the people don't even know who they are following there because they jumped aboard. Nevertheless, the content that is spread is anti-democratic and is anything but normal.
What do you think that will happen with these networks? Are they going to stay organized? Are they going to be connected in the future, or is it going to disappear just as COVID hopefully will disappear from our lives?
It's not going to disappear. Some structures will remain. I give you a couple of examples. We had a guy founding a movement called Querdenken. I don't even know how to translate this, but anyhow, it's thinking of think outside the box movement or something. Out of that movement, we had a party forming. They're called the Bases, and they are proclaiming basic democracy back to the roots. The movement is there, the party is there. I'm not saying that all of them are potentially terrorists or something, but we have a form of violence and aggression forming that I've never seen before. And I think this can be used through these Telegram chats for pretty much everything now.
So, what do you do as a practitioner when it comes to these topics?
Building networks, connecting people. That means also trying to find new cooperation partners. For instance, psychologists become super important now. It is important that we all work on media literacy. This is one of my main advices, actually. People always think it's a matter of how the youth doesn't know how to use social media and all that, and we have to train the youth in schools, but I see a problem with a lot of older people.
And I think this landscape has become even more confusing for practitioners to work in because it's not directly ideological driven when you look at it from the outside, right?
do not ever minimize the problem. Do not ever think these are harmless people marching there, because there's always people in there who will use this for something bigger. And I think this is a difficulty for civil society, because we don't know what is safe and what is not anymore. We needed police protection various times when we monitored these marches, because people just attack us.
Do you have any examples of practitioners or CSOs who seem to be on top of these things?
I don't think anyone is really on top of the things at the moment, but what I can say is we had a lot of organizations funded and forming over the years that do very, very good work, and there's a lot of organizations also trying online to support public counter narratives. So this is, for instance, one thing, that you constantly argue against it and that you constantly go out and say in public, no, and there's another narrative. In my experience, what worked very well, mostly on a local level, is a closer cooperation between, for instance, state and civil society actors, local police, the church workers, the psychologists. Very important, as well as trade unions. Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Everyone in our field of work, it's very normal to look at the perpetrator and not so much at the victims, and so really make sure that those who are targeted by exactly this movement and the developments are safe.
Oh, absolutely. We tend to have these conversations on such a meta level that we sometimes forget that actually people are being affected by these issues and groups. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Nicola. This was really enlightening.
Thank you again very much for having me.
This is very interesting for us as practitioners. Pretty alarming to hear how well organized these groups are and how well connected they are. So as practitioners, we need to be on our toes here, right? These groups are here to stay. These groups have formed new networks, new connections. But still, this is a highly fluid situation. These ideologies shift all the time. Our next guest will be able to help me pick up on some of the issues and themes that Nicola raised in our chat. Stefan Lewandowski is an Australian psychologist currently based at the University of Bristol in the United Kingdom. Thank you so much for joining us, Stefan, and welcome to the RAN podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So why is the far right all of a sudden so involved in being anti-authoritarian?
Well, I think the far right will instrumentalize anything they can lay their hands on. Their interest is in grabbing power, becoming more powerful, and they will sweep up any kind of disgruntlement or discontent. And so if they feel that there's an opportunity there by pretending to be anti-authoritarian, then that is what they will do. The reality, of course, is that they are the most authoritarian people around.
And I think, as practitioners, this has come onto our radar mainly due to everything that happened with the COVID pandemic. How is your view on these new manifestations of the far right all over the world?
And all of a sudden you have this sort of toxic stew of lots of different conspiracy theories, anti-vax, anti-authoritarianism, even anti-elitism. All of these things all of a sudden are bubbling away together and reinforce each other. So there is a real issue of a sort of a spiral there of anti-establishment rhetoric giving rise to populism, which then, if they ever grab power, will make things worse for everybody. And then it becomes more anti-establishment and more anti-democratic, and it just goes on and on.
How are we going to fix this lack of trust in our governments? How do we fix democracy from this point?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? From my point of view, the crucial thing would be to get people involved at the local level, to make them heard, to have citizens' assemblies that are discussing complicated issues, that are representative and that cannot be gamed by lobbyists.
I've got one big question on my mind. Since you're now speaking to a full network of practitioners and people who are actively doing something about these issues, Do you have any tips for us? Are there any trends you're seeing we need to focus on? Are there any good approaches you've identified? How can we help?
Well, good points, good questions. As you may know, I've written a series of handbooks that are available to practitioners. We've got a handbook on COVID-19 vaccine communication. We've got a debunking handbook. We have a conspiracy theory handbook. The thing is, I can't promise a silver bullet. It's a political problem that requires a political solution. But perhaps the most important thing to start with is the idea of inoculation. Now, we have a lot of evidence where we have shown that we can successfully inoculate people against being misled by extremist material, and they become demonstrably less likely to share it after we tell them how they will be misled. We can teach people in a 30-second video, hang on, if somebody is doing that to you, you're being manipulated. So if you give them the tools to resist manipulation, they will gladly take it. The other thing that does work, and we have to talk about it, is deplatforming. So if you remove people from Twitter, makes a big difference. If you take a video off YouTube, makes a huge difference. So deplatforming, radicalizing or radical extremist material has a very positive effect.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Stefan. This was a very insightful conversation. Glad that there were also some happy notes, some good opportunities for interventions. And I hope to see you soon again.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. It's been very enjoyable.
That was a fascinating conversation with Stefan just now, and I think the handbooks he promoted and pitched and the interventions mentioned there are something we can take away here as practitioners. I just want to thank my guests for providing such beautiful insights to the issues we've raised, and also finally a big thank you to all the listeners. I do hope you can join me for the next episode of RAN in Focus podcast, brought to you by RAN Practitioners. Goodbye.